There's three main ingredients to growing a bird: water, air, and feed. Today we're going to talk about water, but more specifically about water lines, cleaning your water lines. We've done videos in the past about water quality, your filtration, how to check them, how often you should check your water, and all those kind of things like that. Not really going to go into that, but one more reminder to do that, because you could give your birds bottled water, Dasani, whatever. And if you're getting it to them in some nasty lines, then what's the use? So don't forget, you still do need to get your lines checked, get your water checked, and make sure your pH, is there any bacteria, what kind of minerals, those types of things. But you got to keep those lines clean, and you can have the best filtration possible on the front end. But when that water gets in the line, there's some crazy things that happen. So we're going to talk about that basically today, and just talk about basically four things: when, the product, how you choose that, the process, and then we're going to close up with why do we need to do that. So when, all right, you basically need to definitely in between flocks. You can do a little stronger cleaning when birds aren't in there. And once again, this video is not doing some earth-shattering, news-breaking stuff that you all don't already do all the time, but just some things to go over. And if you pick up one or two things out of this, then that's even better. But on the when, in between flocks is when you can really get a little more detailed and a little more strong on cleaning the line. Probably the next thing, not only when and deciding how to do it, but would be the product that you pick. So there's a couple of different, basic products that everybody uses. They either use chlorine or some kind of bleach, things like that, or they use peroxide, some form of peroxide. There's some pros and cons and some things you have to think about on each one of these too. And chlorine is one that if the pH is above 7, you're not going to have the disinfectant, the cleaning ability. The pH for chlorine to be activated, it's that same way in your pool. You don't want high pH or your chlorine, and I don't know all the science between the free chlorine and total chlorine and all like that. But you've got to be below 7 for the chlorine to be able to be disinfecting or cleaning out. So that's one thing about chlorine. The other one, and this one's probably the more popular one, is peroxide. Peroxide has the unique ability to break up some scaling that's in the line as well. So it's going to have a disinfectant, but it's also actually going to do a clean. Now, it'd be a lot easier if we had a pipe cleaner and we can run a 500-foot pipe cleaner through these, or 250 on each end of these pipes, but you can't. So what's the best way you're going to get in there? Peroxide is one of the best ways too, and there are different forms of peroxide. There's one that's peracetic acid, PAA, which is basically peroxide and acetic acid. If you've ever been around it, it smells like vinegar. Acetic acid is what that acetate, sour, acid. Acetic acid is what's in vinegar. So it's kind of a combination, but don't mix it yourself. When you start mixing chemicals, bad things can happen. But peracetic acid is one. The acetic acid helps the peroxide to stay more stable, so it has the half-life is not so great. You can actually, it'll be effective for longer in that pipe. So there's a couple of products. You got to think about those things. Probably the biggest thing under the heading of product would be read the label, though. And I hear this, I do a lot of research by talking to growers too, not just reading and seeing the university studies, but also listening to growers who actually do this. So I spent some time with a former breeder manager for one of the top integrators. And what he said was, one of the things people don't pay attention to is the directions. So if that product says leave it X amount, you need to stick to that. They know what they're doing. I hear girls go, well, I have my own way of doing things. Well, look, if that thing says to let sit 24 hours and you don't let it sit 24 hours, then it's not going to do its job. But if you've got a product that you are only supposed to let sit for 6 hours, and you let it sit for 24, now you're going to probably start damaging some equipment. Then you're going to be replacing some O-rings, some different things like that. So as far as product is concerned, read the label and go accordingly as to what the label says. This point, you probably don't need much advice on. It's the process. This is the things you guys and gals do all the time. So you already know how long it takes to get water to be flushed out, how many minutes, how many lines. In fact, some people do all the lines on one end at one time. Some people just do one line at a time. Ford, Chevy, it's your pick. But some things to think about. So you do want to flush the product in. Whatever product you decide, flush it in there. Obey the instructions. How long we're going to let it sit. And now it's time to flush it out. Get it out of there. You know, you may have a bucket at the end. You may have a flush hose that runs it on out there. Whatever you use. One thing to think about too that we may overlook is that just because you flush that line doesn't mean everything's out, because some of that stuff, some of that organic material, maybe that dead, maybe that scaling that you've gotten rid of is maybe now kind of dropped down into a nipple. And you know as well as I do, it don't take much to clog that nipple, to get that nipple from triggering. So one thing you want to do, once you flush in your good water, you get the product out, now you got your good water in, is go through and trigger those nipples. Now, one of the things we just did on a tips and tricks video last week, I believe it was putting a paint roller at the end of the stick, run through and trigger those nipples. We were talking about it in that case to get water ready and dripping from the line so birds will move, migrate. But in this situation, just a little bit of trigger will get that, maybe that little bit of junk that you just got out of line out of that nipple. Things you might not could even see, but can actually keep it from not being gummed up. So flush it out, get it out of there. As far as if we're doing a cleaning during the flock, there's some things to think about. Definitely pay attention to what your instructions say. This product may not be good it may just be an in-between flock. It may not be good for a during the flock clean out. So read the instructions, pick your product, and the dosing. Here's another thing. I forgot to mention this, was even dosing. When you look at a lot of the instructions, sometimes it'll say 2 or 3% of dosing in there. Sometimes that medicator will not dose in at that point. You may have to get what they call a quick blend or an injector that'll shoot it at a greater than 1 to 128. That is not 2 to 3%. So you need to find maybe in your dosing what it's going to take to get the right dose into your line, or you're not going to be effective. You're wasting your time. So flushing in. But if you're during the flock, one thing also that you need to think about too is when you flush in cool water in there, be careful at wintertime. Those baby chicks, when you get cool water in there, maybe nice on a summer day when it's hot, you're trying to cool them down, but on a winter and those young chicks are trying to stay warm, that cool water is just going to bring their body temperature down even more. So you need to, find the nice line in doing that right there. So that is as far as the process. The why. This is the thing that drives all maintenance, okay? Because we talk about on this all the time. Nobody likes to do the maintenance. I mean, it's just maintenance is a headache, and it's something that you really don't see the benefit of actually when you do it. Like going out and mowing the grass, boom, okay, the grass is cut, it looks better. But maintenance is not necessarily what you do because of what you get the satisfaction right there. It's something that you have to get done or bad things are going to happen. Well, this is the why on cleaning your water lines. Like I said, we could run bottled water through there, some fancy Perrier water. You could have the best filtration system to keep any sediment, anything going into that line. But here's what happens. Bacteria is everywhere. Now, biosecurity, we're trying to minimize as much as we can. But when you get bacteria in water, what's going to happen is it starts sticking to things. and then it starts catching microscopic organic material, and then it starts creating this biofilm. Not only is it harmful, but it actually starts creating a biofilm if it's let go. And the bacteria, now that they're catching more and they're accumulating, we're creating a biofilm. It's also, what kind of water is in there? Well, the house is hot. It's warm for the birds. Now we've got a warm, wet environment, and now what's bacteria going to do? It's going to grow. So no matter how much you try, that's the one place that you're going to have bad bacteria. Well, of course, the floor, because they're pooping all over the floor. But the fact is that water line too is what's going to harbor bacteria. So we need to get it moving. The more we can keep it moving, that's why if it sits too long, stagnates, maybe we need to flush out every so often. But maybe getting a cleaner in there every so often, running a probiotic in there like we talked about. But that is the why, and let that motivate you to go, we just flushed the lines not too long ago. The why is what motivates the maintenance. Why are you doing this? Because you know that if you don't, bad things can happen. So there's some basic things on cleaning water lines. Probably nothing revolutionary to you like most of the stuff we talk about, but just most of the time we just want to, hey, put it in your mind, remind you, think of some things. So when in between flocks, how often do you do it during the flock? What's the product that you're going to use? Make a good decision and then follow the instructions. And then the process, put it in, let it sit, get it out, trigger those nipples, make sure that line is clean. And then the why, because some bad stuff can get in there. So we want to keep it because that water is one of the most important things you can provide for your birds. So if you got any questions on this, or if you've got some ideas on some subjects, some things we can do, or maybe you've got a tip, some kind of trick that you do at your farm, we'd love to share it with all the other growers. So until next time, if you need anything or want to reach out to me, Alan at southlandorganics.com or 1-800-608-3755. Until next time.